Welcome to NDNU's podcast, where we bring higher education to life through conversations that matter. Tune in as we unpack current trends, explore big ideas, and spotlight voices from across the Notre Dame de Namur University community.
I have really been looking forward to this conversation today. We are going to explore a deeply universal, but honestly often mysterious part of the human experience. We are looking at how the field of psychology has fundamentally changed the way we understand our dreams over the past century, and more importantly, how this shifting perspective has completely altered the way we view our own inner identities.
That is such a great starting point. The way experts interpret the dreaming mind really serves as a mirror for how we understand human consciousness itself. To guide us through this incredibly fascinating journey, we are looking at a remarkable article titled Following Freud and Jung Through a World of Dreams. This piece was written by Helen Marlo. Helen serves as the Dean of the School of Psychology at Notre Dame de Namur University.
She brings just a tremendous wealth of both clinical and academic insight to this topic. We are basically going to trace the entire evolution of dream research today. We will start in the early days of psychoanalysis, move through a highly skeptical period of strict biological science, and then finally arrive at the remarkable discoveries of modern neuroscience. Watching this progression unfold reveals how dreams have consistently acted as a vital bridge to understanding our unconscious identity.
And I think the most engaging place to begin is really with the idea that our dreams are not simply metaphors for our waking aspirations. You know, we use phrases like in your dreams or a dream come true to describe desires that feel entirely out of reach. But Helen points out that dreams are actually practical tools that help us achieve tangible goals in the real world.
Exactly. The article shares some incredible historical examples of this happening. The author, Mary Shelley, famously conceived the terrifying and, groundbreaking concept for her novel Frankenstein during a vivid dream when she was just 18 years old.
Yes, and that creative breakthrough in literature is matched by equally stunning examples from the world of music. Paul McCartney famously reported that the melody for the classic Beatles song Yesterday came to him entirely within a dream. He simply woke up, walked over to a piano, and played it.
I have always loved that story. And we see this phenomenon working in rigorous scientific disciplines as well. The German-born pharmacologist Otto Lowy discovered acetylcholine, which is a chemical messenger in the brain that actually promotes dreaming, based entirely on a laboratory experiment that he conceptualized while he was fast asleep.
The list of these profound nocturnal achievements is just incredibly diverse. The brilliant Indian mathematician Srinivasa Ramanujan reported that many of his most complex breakthroughs, including entirely new formulas for computing pi, were revealed to him in his dreams. Even in the realm of professional sports, the golfing legend Jack Nicklaus frequently explained how he would give himself technical golf lessons in his sleep, which directly translated into physical improvements in his waking game.
Looking at those examples naturally forces us to ask how the sleeping mind can produce such groundbreaking ideas. The pioneers of early psychology approached these incredible phenomena by looking deeply into the unconscious mind. Sigmund Freud was the first major figure to link our dreams to this hidden realm. He established a perspective where the unconscious functions as a storage space for our desires, memories, and thoughts that sit completely below our conscious awareness.
Freud's perspective was heavily focused on the things we deliberately keep hidden from ourselves. He theorized that when we sleep, our minds explore repressed desires and unresolved emotional conflicts. He believed these hidden elements were mostly rooted in childhood experiences and complex family dynamics. To put it in everyday terms, Freud viewed the unconscious mind as a dark basement. It was essentially a locked room where we hide away the thoughts and desires that our waking identity simply refuses to acknowledge.
That dark basement metaphor is incredibly helpful for visualizing Freud's approach, but it does suggest that our hidden identity is something slightly dangerous or shameful. Carl Jung, who was a contemporary of Freud, offered a profoundly different way to look at this. Jung challenged Freud's ideas by shifting the metaphor entirely. He argued that the unconscious is not a dark, fearful basement, but rather a deep, magical lake.
A magical lake overflowing with undeveloped thoughts and massive creative potential. Jung firmly believed this lake offered the dreamer a direct pathway to personal growth, which is a process he called individuation. Individuation is the lifelong journey of developing into your most complete, authentic self. Instead of just hiding our fears, the unconscious actively tries to help us grow.
Jung also expanded this concept far beyond the individual identity. He posited that dreams act as a bridge connecting our personal, isolated experiences to something he called the collective unconscious. He described it as a vast, shared reservoir of universal experiences, symbols, and ancestral memories that belong to all of humanity.
Under this lens, when we dream, we are actually tapping into a shared human identity, rather than just processing our own isolated struggles. Those foundational frameworks from Freud and Jung provided a deeply meaningful way to view the human mind. However, as the field of psychology evolved into the mid-20th century, the technology used to study the brain advanced dramatically.
That is right. We saw the introduction of new tools like the EEG, which allows researchers to actually see the electrical waves bouncing around inside a sleeping person's brain. We also saw polysomnography, which comprehensively tracks breathing, heart rate, and eye movements during sleep. With these empirical tools, researchers could observe the physical mechanics of sleep in real time.
And that caused the scientific community to shift their focus away from psychoanalysis and strictly toward observable biology. One of the key figures in this empirical movement was the researcher Rosalind Cartwright. She utilized these new technologies to study dreams in a highly systematic, measurable way. The article highlights a brilliant study where Cartwright and her team tracked women who were going through a divorce.
Over a period of 5 months, the researchers regularly monitored exactly how often these women thought about their ex-husbands during the day. Then, Cartwright brought these women into the sleep lab to see what was happening at night. The researchers intentionally woke the subjects during REM sleep, which is the phase of sleep where our most vivid dreaming occurs.
They asked them to report exactly what they had been dreaming about right before opening their eyes. And they discovered a very clear positive correlation. The more the women consciously thought about their former husbands during their waking hours, the more those ex-husbands appeared in their nighttime dreams.
Cartwright used this hard data to establish an entirely new way of looking at dreams. She agreed that dreaming was an unconscious process, but only in the way that physical digestion is an unconscious process. She actively moved away from the idea that dreams are a portal into a mystical realm of hidden motivations or collective human mythology. In Cartwright's view, dreams simply process the overwhelming information and emotions we experience during the day to help regulate our mental well-being.
That represents a massive shift in how we view our core identity. We transition from being explorers of a deep, magical lake to being highly efficient biological processors. But another prominent researcher, Alan Hobson, pushed this empirical biological perspective even further. Hobson relied heavily on modern research methods, and he was highly emphatic about breaking away from the classic psychoanalytic viewpoint completely.
Hobson did not believe dreams held hidden psychological meanings, and he did not even agree with Cartwright that dreams were a meaningful way for the brain to process waking emotions. Along with his collaborator Robert McCarley, Hobson proposed what is known as the activation synthesis hypothesis. To put this hypothesis into plain language, it argues that dreams are just meaningless byproducts of the chemical and neural activity that naturally happens in the brain while we sleep.
It views the dreaming mind simply as a biological machine firing off random electrical sparks, which the brain then desperately tries to stitch into a random, nonsensical narrative. I always find that to be a very stark, almost clinical way to view the human experience. If we accept that our dreams are just meaningless biological exhaust, we lose an incredibly significant dimension of our inner identity.
Helen points this out very clearly in her article. She notes that treating dreams as random neural firing completely fails to explain the more profound aspects of dreaming, such as precognited dreams that actually seem to foretell future events before they happen in the waking world. Helen also makes the excellent point that a purely biological perspective cannot account for the extraordinary creative breakthroughs we discussed earlier.
Exactly. If dreams are just meaningless electrical noise, it is practically impossible to explain how a mathematician like Ramanujan could pull entirely new formulas for pi out of his sleep, or how Otto Lowy could design an entire scientific experiment. Furthermore, dismissing dreams as random brain activity ignores centuries of documented clinical work where individuals have found deep, life-altering meaning and genuine guidance in their dreams.
That tension between the biological and the psychological brings us to the modern era of dream research, which I think is the most exciting phase of all. We are now coming full circle. Helen explains that contemporary researchers are moving away from the strict biological skepticism of the late 20th century. They are beginning to merge modern scientific methodology with the classic, deeply meaningful views of Freud and Jung.
This modern integration allows us to appreciate the brilliant mechanics of the physical brain while still honoring the deep emotional resonance of the human mind. A perfect example of this harmony is the work of Mark Solms. Solms is a contemporary researcher who has been tremendously influential in blending Freudian psychoanalysis with hard, modern neuroscience. Through his rigorous brain mapping research, he actually validated Freud's early theories about the fundamental nature of dreams.
Solms demonstrated through modern neuroscience that the motivational basis of our dreams simply cannot be reduced to random neural firing. He proved that the brain's core motivational and reward circuits are highly active during dreaming. By proving the dreams are driven by deep internal motivations, Solms brought the concept of hidden meaning back into the credible scientific conversation.
We are also seeing this wonderful modern integration happening with Carl Jung's theories. The researcher Kelly Bulkley is doing incredible work by bringing Jungian concepts into the 21st century. Bulkley fully endorses Jung's idea that our dreams are heavily influenced by cultural, social, and spiritual themes. But what makes Bulkley's approach so groundbreaking is his use of artificial intelligence to analyze massive databases of collected dream journals.
That is such a fascinating collision of ancient human mythology and cutting-edge digital technology. Bulkley notes that artificial intelligence systems are capable of performing complex statistical analyses on a massive scale that human researchers simply cannot match. By feeding thousands of dream records into these systems, AI can uncover deep, global patterns in our subconscious.
It is truly remarkable to think that a digital machine could help us map the collective unconscious that Jung described so beautifully a century ago. However, Bulkley offers a very important caution regarding this technology. He strongly warns that AI should never be considered a substitute for actual human psychotherapy, nor should we ever view an algorithm as a higher authority on the meaning of our own minds.
Because of those ethical and practical limitations, Bulkley advocates for what he calls a human-AI hybrid model. This approach uses the massive processing power of artificial intelligence to find the broad, universal patterns, but it relies entirely on human empathy, clinical experience, and personal introspection to actually interpret the meaning of those patterns.
It perfectly balances the empirical data processing we gain from modern science with the profound depth of meaning we inherited from psychoanalysis. This active, highly engaged approach to our dreams is also beautifully illustrated by the recent work of psychologist Deirdre Barrett. Barrett has conducted fascinating research into the specific role dreams play in active problem solving. She focuses on a clinical technique called dream incubation.
This technique completely moves away from the idea that we just passively watch our dreams happen, and instead treats the dreamer as an active, intentional participant in their nocturnal identity. Barrett designed an incredibly clever experiment where she asked her participants to focus deeply on a specific waking problem they needed to solve right as they were falling asleep each night.
The results of this dream incubation study were incredibly validating for the power of the unconscious mind. The data showed that half of all the participants in her study reported having dreams that were directly related to the specific problem they had focused on. Even more impressively, within that specific group, more than half actually had dreams that contained tangible, real-world solutions to those problems.
This definitively proves that our dreams are not just playing back the stressful events of the day, nor are they just random neurological static. They function as an active, creative workshop where our identity continuously works to overcome waking obstacles.
This modern understanding brings a wonderful sense of utility and agency back to our sleeping lives.
When we actively build relationships with our dreams and engage with them through deep introspection, they offer genuine insights that can directly influence our daily waking lives. Summarizing this historical journey gives us a very clear view of how much our understanding of identity has grown. We began with Freud's concept of repressed desires hiding in a dark basement, and Jung's vision of a collective unconscious connecting us all through a magical lake.
We then moved through a highly skeptical period of empirical biology, where researchers like Cartwright and Hobson viewed dreams as either simple data processing or meaningless chemical exhaust. Finally, we arrived at a beautifully integrated modern view, where tools like neuroscience and artificial intelligence help us validate and explore the deep, symbolic nature of our minds.
Helen leaves us with a brilliant closing thought that perfectly encapsulates this vast, complicated topic. She notes that the classic imagery of the ocean iceberg is often used to visualize Freud and Jung's paradigms, with the small conscious mind visible above the water and the massive unconscious mind hidden below the surface. She writes that the subject of dreams is as vast as the unconscious is deep. By continually returning to these foundational ideas and exploring them with new scientific tools, we will keep discovering new ways that our dreams shape our identity and solve our waking problems.
Thanks for joining us on the Notre Dame Dana Moore University podcast, where higher education meets real-world insight. If you're passionate about helping others, explore NDNU's School of Psychology programs, designed for aspiring professionals who want to turn that passion into a meaningful career. Learn more at ndnu.edu or call 650-508-3600. Classes are enrolling now. See you next time.